for the next 6 years, Moody was in America evangelizing. But then he and Sankey came back to the UK in 1881 to 1884. And we're here today at the Corn Exchange, where he had some of his most impactful meetings in all his trips to the UK. My impression has always been that this second visit to the UK by Moody and Sankey was a bit of a disappointment. And I mainly got that idea because there's so little written about it, and that which I did read was not terribly enthusiastic. But Moody himself had a different view of this. He had an interview with the Pall Mall Gazette at the end of his London mission, and they wrote, "Compared to your last visit to England, how does this stand?" "Better," was the reply. "Better in every respect. There has not been so much newspaper sensation. We have had more meetings, better meetings, and the work has been of a more satisfactory character in every way. For the last 8 months," that's when he was in London, "I have addressed on an average 10,000 people every day. We always rested on Saturdays, but we had on average 25,000 at our Sunday services." And the interviewer reckoned, he did some calculations, that Moody had spoken to a little over 2 million people on the mission, and that is only 10% less than on the mission in 1873 to 1875. Now, Moody's talks had a difference on this mission. He had realized that in order to have really long-lasting salvations and deep salvations, one needed repentance. And he recognized that on the previous visit, it was more the power of his voice and his character that swayed people towards Jesus. So on this trip, there was much more talk about repentance as opposed to salvation. I mean, there was a lot of salvation as well, but there was a heavy emphasis on repentance. And he also realized that in order to have a strong Christian, that people needed to be taken from salvation into serving Christ. And so that was another significant emphasis on this mission. And he realized that spending more time in each place would give him more time to encourage people to step out into the calling that God had for them. This mission lasted 2.5 years approximately. They had about 8 months in Scotland. Then they went to Swansea and Cardiff and some English cities, and they ended up with an 8-month mission in London. 2 of the highlights of this mission were his invitation to Oxford and Cambridge. He was really excited at the prospect of bringing many undergraduates to the Lord, because you can imagine that these people were the creme de la creme in those days of society, and that they would become eventually leaders of all the main institutions in the nation. So if they could be taken for Jesus, then the whole nation could be changed. And one particular thing happened in Cambridge, which was really amazing fruit, and that was the Cambridge 7. Now, the Cambridge 7 were 7 young men from good families, many of whom came to the Lord in these meetings. And they decided that they were going to go to China as missionaries. And in fact, they left in 1885, all of them, and nearly all of them stayed in China for their whole lives. One of them was C.T. Studd, who was a famous English cricketer, and he went to China and then later on to other places. And so the fruit to China and to other nations was amazing. Can you imagine this place full of undergraduates listening to the gospel, hearing about Jesus, and a lot of them were saved in these meetings. Their example inspired many people to go to China. And in fact, the applications to go to China over the next 15 years went from 163 to nearly 800. And one minister said that the influence of Moody's meetings actually went down from generation to generation. There was a new Cambridge Intercollegiate Christian Union, and he said this, from his flaming torch, their lamps were lighted, and year by year, on graduating, they have passed them on to their successors. And so the influence of Moody went down to succeeding graduates, which is fantastic. The mission in London was different this time. In the 1875 mission, they had 4 big venues, and people would, in different parts of London, and people would come from all over London to those venues. This time they built 2 temporary venues which held 5,000 people each, made of corrugated iron and wood, and they set them up firstly in Wandsworth and in Islington, and then after 3 weeks they moved them to Clapham and St Pancras. And so all through the 8 months, this is what they did. They moved the buildings to where the people were to enable more people to come. Now, I believe that this was a revival. It was not only many people coming to the Lord through this mission around the nation, but at the same time, the William Booth and the Salvation Army were expanding at a rate of knots, and there were many revivals across the UK through them. So I really believe that the nation was under the hand of God at that time. And then Moody and Sankey returned to America, where he spent the next few years again doing missions in America and setting up his Moody Bible Institute, which still exists today. And then they came back for a final time in 1891. My only source for this visit in 1891 to 2 is the Christian newspaper. Evidently every meeting was recorded in the Scottish Leader, but unfortunately the microfiche in the British Library was not good enough to read, so the only source I have is the Christian. It's strange, nobody mentions it, I mean, only in passing, even in his biographies. I haven't found any account in any book so far, which is puzzling. And on looking at and reading all the accounts, I have more questions than answers, really, as to whether a revival took place at this time. And I don't really think it did. Anyway, the aims of Moody in this mission were different from normal, from the other 2. He wanted to concentrate on young men in the provinces. And so he decided to do much shorter meetings to cover more distance and to speak to more young men, which, because he understood that it was the young Christians who, if they were fired up and encouraged to step out in their calling, that they could go out and change the nation. And so that was his plan. So he spoke sort of the balance of his speaking, which before had been more towards evangelism, it was more towards serving God on this occasion, although evangelism was still an important aspect. From November 1891 to the end of March 92, Moody was in Scotland. And he and Sankey worked tirelessly as usual. They went to 100 different towns in that time and spoke on average 3 times a day. Just extraordinary. And then after that, they went to the Holy Land for a time and Ireland, then some English towns, 2 weeks at the Metropolitan Tabernacle in London, and a couple more towns, and they left in the November. There were prayer meetings in place before Moody's visits in most of the towns, which was an important ingredient if one wanted revival. And then there was the hunger and the expectancy of the people, which was really great, which is another important ingredient. And the venues were full to bursting. And not only one venue, but there was nearly always an overflow and sometimes 2 overflow meetings. Thousands attended his meetings every day. But unfortunately, because of the shortness of his visit to the various towns, he was unable to do, in many places, the important work of the inquiry meeting. It was in the inquiry meeting where he drew in the net and brought people to Christ. But he only had time occasionally to do one. And he was complaining a lot about the lack of helpers, workers, to assist in this, because it was the local workers who needed to point people to Jesus in the inquiry meetings, but they were lacking. And also many didn't know how to do it. So he spent some time teaching occasionally on how to do an inquiry meeting. This is strange because this was Moody's 3rd visit to the United Kingdom. You would have thought that the ministers would have known the best way to prepare to get the most positive results from this mission. The power of God was reported to have been flowing in nearly all the meetings, and not just through Moody and Sankey, but through the ministers who dealt with the overflow and ministers who took on the meetings once Moody had left. Now, there are reports that those were powerful, but I have not seen anything of the results of those meetings, so I don't know whether the power of God spread out after Moody left. One of the most amazing aspects of this visit was the unity that was all around the country, even greater than at previous missions that Moody did. All the denominations took part in virtually every town, which is extraordinary. And then something different on this occasion was Moody really attacked drink, the whiskey that was sold all through Scotland. And many of the places he went to had stills and breweries and all over the place. It was a real problem in Scotland, and it was a problem throughout the UK. But he attacked the Scottish whiskey viciously wherever he went. One of the things that really blessed him was that he, wherever he went in Scotland, he found ministers telling him that they'd come to Jesus in one of his previous missions. And that really shows the fruit of his work. The meetings around the United Kingdom elsewhere had the same characteristics, and everything seemed to be in place for a great revival. There was unity, there was expectancy, there was hunger, there was the power of God flowing through Moody and other ministers. And even the Free Church in Scotland, they sent a letter out to all their ministers saying, the work of religious awakening going on in various parts of the country. The work of religious awakening, they believed that there was an awakening going on. But I cannot see any signs of revival breaking out elsewhere in the UK, and I find that puzzling. One reason for the lack of apparent revival breaking out could be the lack of inquiry meetings, or the comparative lack of inquiry meetings, and the comparative fewer salvations. But also the church seems to have been in a bad place at that time. Many ministers seem to have been infected by what they read in Darwin's Origin of the Species, the Higher German Criticism, and other books, which were watering down the gospel and denying some of the tenets of the faith. So this may be discouraging pastors to get involved. There were many pastors, I mean, in every town, nearly all the ministers came to the meetings. That's the puzzling thing. So why didn't they get set on fire? Well, the Christian reported that the average modern Scottish minister is a very incombustible person. So they believed that there was something wrong, that the ministers just weren't getting involved, it seems. And so that may well be why nothing happened. Because if the minister was not involved in a revival, it would never come to a church, because he had so much influence. At the end of the London mission, Moody went to a doctor because he felt he had, his voice was very hoarse. And the doctor said that he had a heart condition, which would probably kill him. And it did so 7 years later. But this mission was still really good. Thousands came to the Lord. Thousands were encouraged to go out and serve God and fulfill their destiny. So, but did it go beyond the meetings into other places, into the nation? I have not found any record of it, but perhaps I will in the future. The rest of Moody's life was spent doing missions in America and building up the Moody Bible Institute. And then he died 10 days short of the new century at the age of 62. DL Moody was one of the greatest revivalists we've ever seen in the United Kingdom, and we should be so grateful that he spent 5.5 years here trying to bring this nation into a better place. Tens of thousands came to the Lord, and tens of thousands more were encouraged and set on fire to go and fulfill their destiny over the 3 different missions that he was here for. He had a great gift of communication, especially to the young. And as I've said repeatedly, he worked tirelessly. Lord, just please bring many more DL Moodys to serve this nation.